Deep in the frozen caves of Pluto, something stirred. For 500,000 years, nothing had moved in these dark chambers except the slow crawl of ice crystals. Now, lights flickered on one by one, casting blue shadows across the walls. Pod number 17 hissed open. Cold air rushed out as Commander Alan Weber opened his eyes for the first time in 500,000 years. His breath came in short gasps as his lungs remembered how to work. His mind felt foggy, like trying to think through thick mud. Vital signs stable. "Welcome back, Commander Weber," said a calm female voice. Alan tried to speak, but could only manage a groan. His mouth was dry, his muscles felt weak. "Please remain still while your body readjusts," the voice continued. "I am Gaia, the facility artificial intelligence. The date is approximately 502,437 years since your entry into cryosleep. Awakening protocols were triggered as programmed." Alan struggled to sit up. The pod room stretched around him, filled with thousands of similar sleep chambers. Most remained dark and closed, but nearby a few were opening, their occupants also beginning to wake. 500,000 years, Alan whispered. His voice was rough from centuries of disuse. So long. He remembered the last days before sleep, the alien ships darkening Earth's skies, the final battles, the desperate plan to hide a portion of humanity's fleet and soldiers at the edge of the solar system, preserved in secret to one day return. "Has Earth been monitoring us?" Alan asked. "Are there any messages?" Gaia's voice turned solemn. "There have been no messages from Earth since 3 months after your cryosleep began. At that time, all human signals from Earth ceased permanently." Words hit Alan like a physical blow. Though he had known this outcome was likely, having it confirmed made it real. Earth had fallen. Humanity had been conquered, or worse. The invaders? The species call themselves the Vran. They have occupied the entire solar system, with their main population centers on Earth, Mars, and the terraformed Venus. They believe humans to be extinct. Alan swung his legs over the edge of the pod. The floor felt cold against his bare feet. Standing required effort, but he managed. Nearby, other pods were opening. Maria Reynolds, his security chief, was already on her feet. She looked disoriented, but alert. "Commander," she said, nodding, weakly. "We actually made it?" Engineer Sam Howard emerged from his pod, immediately asking questions about the facility systems. From Pod 23, Science Officer Diane Mitchell appeared, her face showing the same grief Alan felt about Earth. "Gaia," Alan called out. "Activate the central command room and show us the current state of the solar system." The 4 officers made their way through winding corridors carved into Pluto's ice. Gaia guided them with lights along the floor. Though they had trained for post-awakening procedures, nothing could truly prepare them for the reality of being the last free humans, awakening 500,000 years after their civilization fell. The command center hummed to life as they entered. Screens covered the walls, showing images of planets that looked both familiar and strange. Earth appeared the most changed, still blue and green, but with different continents and strange structures, visible from space. "The Vran have reshaped much of the solar system," Gaia explained. "Earth serves as their central colony and ruling seat. They consider it the prize of their empire." Maria studied the defense systems displayed on one screen. "They've grown comfortable. Their security measures are impressive but designed for external threats. They have no reason to expect danger from within the system." "How many of us are being awakened?" Sam asked, examining the base schematics. "The first awakening wave includes 500 personnel," Gaia replied. "Primarily command staff, engineers, and tactical specialists. The remaining 9,500 will be revived once initial systems are operational." Alan nodded. "And the fleet?" Gaia dimmed the lights and activated a holographic display in the center of the room. A 3-dimensional map of Pluto appeared, revealing vast chambers hidden beneath the surface ice. "The shipyard remains intact and undiscovered," Gaia said. "All vessels have been maintained by automated systems. Additionally, the fabrication plants have continued production and upgrades using designs developed during your sleep cycle." The hologram zoomed in, showing rows of warships suspended in massive underground hangars. sleek destroyers, transport, vessels, fighters, and at the center a massive dreadnought nearly 2 miles long. Earth's memory, Alan whispered, recognizing the flagship they had planned but never completed before the fall of humanity. Yes, Gaia confirmed. Construction finished approximately 100,000 years ago. It contains our most advanced weapon systems. Diane stepped closer to the hologram, her scientific mind already analyzing possibilities. What have you learned about the Vran during our sleep? Weaknesses? Social structures? They are hierarchical, with a ruling class that has grown increasingly separate from their worker population. Their biology remains vulnerable to specific radiation frequencies we can target. Their communication networks have exploitable flaws. Maria's expression hardened. They think humans are extinct. They won't be expecting us. More officers arrived in the command center. Tactical specialists, communications experts, engineers. All wore the same look of determination mixed with disbelief at the time that had passed. Alan walked to the front of the room, feeling the weight of history on his shoulders. They were humanity's last military force, Earth's final hidden hope. For 500,000 years, the Vran had believed they had ended the human story. They were wrong. Our mission begins now, Alan announced to the gathering officers. First, we complete revival procedures and bring our systems online. Second, we gather current intelligence. Then we plan our approach. He paused, looking at the faces around him, the last free humans in existence. 500,000 years ago, the Vran thought they destroyed humanity. They took our world and built their empire on its ashes. They believe we are nothing but an extinct species from their ancient history. His voice grew stronger with each word. We are going to show them how wrong they are. We are not extinct. We are not defeated. We are humanity's vengeance, awakened after 500,000 years, and we have returned to take back what's ours. Around the room, determination replaced shock on the faces of his officers. They had volunteered for this mission knowing they might wake to find everything lost. Now the time had come to fulfill their purpose. Prepare the fleet, Alan ordered. We are ghosts from humanity's past, and we have returned to haunt those who destroyed our world. The stealth ship glided silently through the darkness of space. Captain Lisa Morgan watched through the viewing screen as they approached the blue-green planet that was once home to humanity. Earth looked both familiar and strange. The continents had shifted over 500,000 years. Massive cities now covered large areas of the surface, connected by glowing lines of transportation networks. Maintain stealth systems at maximum, Lisa ordered. The Vran must not detect us. Tactical Officer Greg Wilson nodded. Stealth field holding. Their scanning systems are sweeping right past us. Lisa had been chosen to lead this first close reconnaissance mission. Their task was simple but dangerous. Gather current intelligence on Earth and the Vran civilization. Her small team included Greg and communications specialist Rick Perry. Look at those structures, Rick said, pointing to enormous towers that reached from the surface up toward space, orbital elevators. They've built at least 7 of them. Lisa zoomed in the view. The towers stretched up beyond the atmosphere, connecting to space stations that served as docking points for large ships. Vran vessels moved between these stations, in orderly patterns. Those weren't in Gaia's last records, Lisa noted. Their technology has advanced significantly. For 3 weeks, the Hidden Fleet had been gathering intelligence. Unmanned probes had been sent to all planets in the solar system. Venus and Mars had been terraformed to suit Vran biology. The gas giants had mining stations extracting resources. But Earth remained the center of their civilization, the crown jewel of their conquest. We're getting strong signals from the northern continent, Rick reported from his communication station. Massive data transmissions. I think it's their main government center. Lisa directed their ship into low orbit, staying within Earth's sensor shadow. From this position, they could observe without being detected. The Vran had grown comfortable in their dominance. Their security was designed for threats from outside the solar system, not from within. Record everything, Lisa instructed. Commander Weber needs complete information for planning our strikes. As they orbited, they observed the daily patterns of Vran society. The aliens had divided their society into clear castes. The ruling elite lived in sprawling palace complexes. Worker groups maintained the infrastructure. Military forces patrolled in predictable patterns. They've grown complacent, Greg observed. 500,000 years without opposition has made them careless. On the third day of observation, their sensors detected something unexpected, a small region in what was once called North America that showed different patterns of life signs. These readings can't be right, Rick said, checking his equipment. These signatures look human. Lisa leaned forward. Confirm that. After several minutes of scanning, Rick nodded with wide eyes. Confirmed. There's a small population of humans on Earth, about 10,000 individuals in this region. This discovery changed everything. The fleet had awakened believing humanity had been completely wiped out. The existence of survivors raised new questions and possibilities. We need to make contact, Lisa decided. Prepare landing procedures for tonight. Under cover of darkness, their ship descended to a remote area near the human settlement. They landed in a forested valley, their stealth systems hiding them from Vran detection. The air smelled different than in the historical records. Strange. Plants had evolved over the centuries. Lisa led a small team out of the ship. They wore protective suits to shield against any unknown biologicals. The forest around them was filled with unusual hybrid plants, some clearly Earth species, others modified or entirely alien. As they approached the settlement boundary, movement caught their attention. Figures emerged from the trees, humans, wielding primitive weapons. They wore clothing made of plant materials and animal skins, but their faces were unmistakably human. One man stepped forward. He was tall with dark skin and appeared to be in his 30s. A scar ran across his left cheek. His eyes widened at the sight of Lisa's team in their fleet uniforms. The return, he whispered in heavily accented English. It is happening now. Lisa removed her helmet slowly. We are from the Hidden Fleet. Who are you? I am Ben Carter, the man replied. Leader of the Rememberers. We have waited for your coming for many generations. Ben explained as they walked toward the settlement. When the Vran conquered Earth, they hadn't completely eliminated humans. Small populations were preserved in controlled environments, living museums of a conquered species. Over time, these conservation zones became less strictly monitored, as humans were viewed as harmless curiosities. Our ancestors passed down the knowledge, Ben said. Stories of the fleet hidden at the edge of the solar system. We didn't know if it was true or just legends, but we prepared anyway. The human settlement was hidden within a dense forest. About 200 simple dwellings housed the community. Children stopped their play to stare at the newcomers in there. Strange clothing. The Vran think we are simple primitives, Ben continued. They allow us to live in these conservation zones as reminders of their great conquest. But in secret, we have maintained our knowledge and skills. He led them to a concealed underground room. Inside were surprising treasures, old computers, books, weapons, and maps, all carefully preserved through generations. We have been watching the Vran for centuries, Ben said, learning their weaknesses, preparing for your return. Meanwhile, back at the Pluto base, engineer Sam Howard had made an important discovery. He summoned Commander Weber to a secure storage facility deep within the ice. These were never in the original mission plans, Sam said as the heavy doors opened. Inside were rows of specialized weapons, devices that had been developed during their long sleep by Gaia and the automated manufacturing systems. Nanite swarms programmed to target Vran biology, Sam explained. Gravity manipulation fields, advanced AI combat systems. The fabrication plants kept developing new technologies based on our original directives. Commander Weber examined one of the devices. These could change the balance of power. We're still outnumbered, but with these, there's something else, Science Officer Diane Mitchell said, joining them. Gaia has detected unusual communications. The Vran are planning something big, a celebration of sorts. She displayed a holographic image showing massive preparations around Earth. It's the 500,000-year anniversary of their conquest, she explained. In 2 weeks, their entire leadership will gather on Earth for ceremonies. Their supreme leader will be there, along with all their highest officials. Commander Weber's expression hardened. Then that's when we make our move. Call Captain Morgan's team back. We need to coordinate with these Earth humans. As Lisa's team prepared to return to their ship with Ben Carter, he pointed to the night sky. Soon those stars will belong to humans again, he said. Our children have waited for 500,000 years to see this day. Lisa looked up at the distant points of light. We thought we were coming back to avenge a dead race. Instead, we're coming back to free a living one. In the distance, a Vran patrol ship passed overhead, its searchlight sweeping the forest. The humans remained perfectly still until it passed. The Vran are celebrating their conquest anniversary. In 2 weeks, Ben said quietly. They believe humans are just exhibits in their living museums. They have no idea that humanity's revenge has been 500,000 years in the making. The command center inside Pluto Base buzzed with activity. Commander Alan Weber stood at the central table, reviewing holographic maps of the solar system. Around him, his officers finalized plans for humanity's first strike against the Vran in 500,000 years. Our strategy must be precise, Alan said. We cannot match their numbers, but we have surprise on our side. They believe humans are extinct. We will use that advantage. Security Chief Maria Reynolds nodded. The plan has 3 phases. First, we disable their communication network. Then we take out their orbital defenses. Finally, we strike at their leadership during their celebration. The intelligence gathered by Captain Morgan's team had proven invaluable. The surviving humans on Earth had collected detailed information about Vran patterns and weaknesses over centuries. Ben Carter, brought back to the Pluto base, now stood among the fleet officers, providing insights that only someone who had lived under Vran rule could offer. The Vran depend heavily on their relay stations, Ben explained, pointing to locations on the map. There are 7 major communication hubs. The largest is on Callisto, one of Jupiter's moons. Science Officer Diane Mitchell stepped forward. I'll lead the operation to disable the Callisto hub. A small team with our stealth technology should be able to infiltrate their facility. Alan approved with a nod. Maria, you'll command the strike against their orbital defense platforms around Saturn. Sam, prepare the nanite weapons for deployment. We attack in 3 days. As preparations intensified, the fleet ships emerged from their long hibernation. Thousands of crew members were awakened from cryosleep and brought up to speed on their mission. Fighter pilots trained on simulators updated with current Vran ship capabilities. Engineers checked and rechecked the advanced weapon systems developed during their long sleep. On the morning of the attack, Alan addressed the assembled fleet crews via holographic projection. His image appeared on every ship, in every briefing room. Today we begin the reclamation of our solar system, he said. For 500,000 years, the Vran have believed humans were a defeated species. Today, they learn how wrong they were. Each of you carries the hopes of humanity, both our ancestors who fell in the last battle, and the survivors who have waited for our return. Execute your missions with precision. Show no mercy. The time for humanity's revenge has come. The first phase began in silence. 5 stealth ships slipped away from the Pluto base, heading toward their designated targets. Diane's team approached Callisto, staying in the shadow of Jupiter to avoid detection. Maria's forces moved toward Saturn's rings, where the Vran had built massive defense platforms. Inside the Callisto communication hub, Vran technicians monitored signals from across their empire. None noticed the small team of humans who entered through an unused maintenance tunnel. Diane led her team through the facility's lower levels. They planted explosive devices at key junction points and power cores. Charges set, Diane whispered, into her communicator. Extraction in progress. As her team retreated to their ship, similar operations were happening at 6 other communication hubs across the solar system. At the precise coordinated moment, all 7 hubs exploded simultaneously. The Vran communication network collapsed in cascading failure. Across their solar system empire, Vran commanders suddenly found themselves isolated, unable to coordinate responses. With Phase 1 complete, Maria launched her attack on the Saturn defense platforms. Her ships emerged from stealth mode, firing advanced energy weapons that cut through Vran shields. The platforms, designed to defend against external threats, were vulnerable to attacks from within the solar system. "Platform 3 is down," reported one of Maria's officers. 4 and 5 are crippled." The Vran stationed on the platform scrambled to respond. Their confusion was evident in their disorganized counterattacks. Without their communication network, they couldn't call for reinforcements or coordinate defensive measures. On Earth, Ben Carter's people received the signal they had waited generations for. Zoe Adams, leader of the largest human settlement, activated sleeper cells in every conservation zone. Thousands of humans who had pretended submission for centuries now rose up, targeting Vran infrastructure and creating diversions. The Vran Supreme Council convened an emergency session in their capital city. Reports of attacks throughout the solar system flooded in through backup channels. "Impossible," said the Vran Supreme Leader, a tall figure with pale blue skin and 6-fingered hands. "The humans were eradicated 500,000 years ago. This must be another species using salvaged human technology." The military commander disagreed. "The attackers are using ships of human design, but with technology far beyond what they possessed when we conquered them. Somehow they survived." The debate ended abruptly when alarms blared throughout the council chamber. The orbital defense network above Earth detected a massive object emerging from light speed at the edge of the system. The dreadnought Earth's Memory appeared near Jupiter, its massive form dwarfing the Vran vessels patrolling the area. Without warning, it fired its main weapon, a concentrated beam that sliced through the Vran Grand Armada's flagship during their military parade. The pride of the Vran fleet split in two, secondary explosions rippling through its length. Commander, Weber stood on the bridge of Earth's Memory, watching the destruction of the Vran flagship on the main screen. "Send the message," he ordered. On every Vran communication device across the solar system, the same image appeared, a human figure, in a fleet uniform speaking directly to them. "I am Commander Alan Weber of humanity's hidden fleet," he said. 500,000 years ago, you invaded our world. You believed you had exterminated our species. You were wrong. We have returned to reclaim what is ours. Your leadership has 3 hours to surrender. After that, we will show no mercy." The Vran Supreme Leader watched the message with growing horror. Around the council table, the other leaders began arguing about the proper response. "This is impossible," the cultural minister insisted. "Humans were primitive. They could not have survived in secret for 500,000 years." "The evidence is before your eyes," the military commander growled. "They not only survived, they evolved their technology while waiting. They planned this for 500,000 years." The Supreme Leader rose from his seat. "Mobilize all forces. Call our fleets from nearby star systems. We crushed these humans once. We will do so again." Back on the Earth's Memory, Alan received reports of Vran fleet movements. As expected, they were calling for reinforcements. "They're responding exactly as predicted," Maria noted. "Pulling their forces back to defend Earth." Alan nodded. "Deploy Phase 3. Target their gathering forces." Across the solar system, hidden weapons platforms activated. Nanite swarms designed to target Vran biology were released near key Vran bases. Gravity manipulation fields disrupted the engines of their largest ships. On Earth, Zoe Adams led attacks against Vran transportation hubs, preventing ground forces from reaching their ships. The human conservation zones became centers of resistance, using knowledge passed down through generations. By the end of the day, humanity had delivered a message the Vran could not ignore. The species they thought extinct had returned with advanced technology and a 500,000-year grudge. In the Vran Supreme Council chamber, the military commander addressed the shocked leadership. "Impossible," the Supreme Leader whispered. "We exterminated them. No species recovers from extinction." The military commander's expression was grim. "This one did, and they've been planning their return for 500,000 years." The early victories of the human fleet soon met with fierce resistance. The Vran Empire was vast, stretching across multiple star systems. As news of the attacks spread, reinforcements began arriving from nearby colonies. On the bridge of Earth's Memory, Commander Alan Weber watched the tactical display with growing concern. Hundreds of Vran warships were entering the solar system. Their ships were not as advanced as the upgraded human fleet, but they made up for it with sheer numbers. "They've mobilized their reserve fleets," Maria reported. "At least 3,000 ships inbound from Alpha Centauri and Proxima systems." Alan studied the display. The human fleet had fewer than 200 vessels. Even with their superior technology, they couldn't match these numbers. "We need to change tactics," he decided. "We can't win a direct confrontation against their full forces." Engineer Sam Howard joined them on the bridge. "The nanite weapons are effective, but they require close deployment. We can't reach all their ships." Alan turned to Science Officer Diane Mitchell. "What about the Vran home planets? Can we target their settlements directly?" Diane shook her head. "Not ethically. The civilian populations aren't combatants. We would be committing the same crime they did against Earth." Her words gave Alan pause. Revenge had driven their mission for 500,000 years. But was becoming the monsters they fought against really the answer? Before he could respond, alarms blared across the bridge. The tactical display showed a large Vran battle group approaching Neptune, where several human ships were regrouping. "It's a trap," Maria realized too late. "They predicted our movements." The human ships near Neptune came under heavy fire. The destroyer New Dawn took multiple direct hits to its engines. Its captain, John Foster, remained calm as he gave his final orders. "All hands to escape pods," he commanded. "Set the reactor to overload. We'll take some of them with us." The New Dawn exploded in a blinding flash, taking 3 Vran cruisers with it. But the loss was devastating. Over 200 crew members were gone, including several key officers who had been essential to the fleet's plans. Around the solar system, similar scenes played out. The Vran were learning, adapting to human tactics. They began jamming the fleet's communication frequencies, making coordination difficult. Meanwhile, Captain Lisa Morgan's stealth ship was hit while attempting to evade Vran patrols near Earth. With engines failing, she had no choice but to make an emergency landing. "Find a remote area," she ordered Greg Wilson, "preferably near one of the human settlements." The ship crashed in a dense forest far from the major Vran cities. Lisa, Greg, and Rick survived, but their vessel was beyond repair. They salvaged what equipment they could and set out to find allies. After 2 days of hiking through unfamiliar terrain, they encountered a patrol from Zoe Adams's resistance fighters. The Earth humans led them to a hidden underground base. "We've been fighting them for generations," Zoe explained as they walked through the tunnel system. "Small acts of resistance, nothing that would make them exterminate us completely. Until now." Zoe was younger than Ben Carter, perhaps in her 20s, but her eyes held the determination of someone much older. She had been training resistance fighters since childhood, preparing for this moment. "The Vran are in chaos," she told Lisa. "Their leaders never imagined humans could threaten them again. But they're recovering quickly and bringing in massive reinforcements." In the central chamber of the base, dozens of Earth humans were analyzing Vran communications and planning attacks on infrastructure. They used a mix of salvaged Vran technology and tools created from natural materials. "We've discovered something that might help," Zoe said, leading Lisa to a makeshift laboratory. "The Vran have engineered their biology to be perfectly attuned to Earth's modified ecosystem. They changed our planet to suit them, and then changed themselves to match it perfectly." Lisa studied the diagrams and notes. "You're saying their strength is also their weakness?" "Exactly," Zoe nodded. "They're dependent on the specific environmental balance they've created. Disrupt that balance. And we disrupt them," Lisa finished. "We need to get this information to Commander Weber." Back at the Kuiper Belt, the human fleet had retreated to regroup. The losses had been heavy. 5 ships destroyed, hundreds of crew members lost. Morale was wavering. In a quiet moment between strategy sessions, Science Officer Diane approached Commander Weber with troubling information. "I've been reviewing Gaia's historical archives," she said softly. "There's something you should see." She showed him records that had been sealed before their cryosleep, documents suggesting that humanity's expansion into the solar system had led to the first contact with the Vran, and that humans had fired the first shots. "Are you saying we provoked the invasion?" Alan asked, his voice strained. I'm saying, the history we were taught was incomplete, Diane replied. The Vran responded with overwhelming force, yes. Their conquest was brutal and wrong. But the narrative that they attacked unprovoked may not be entirely accurate. This revelation shook Alan's resolve. For 500,000 years, the mission had been clear: avenge humanity against unprovoked alien aggression. Now that certainty was crumbling. A communication came through from Earth. Lisa Morgan had managed to establish a secure connection using the Resistance Network. Commander, we've discovered critical intelligence about Vran biology, she reported, explaining what Zoe had found. They've linked themselves genetically to Earth's ecosystem. It's their strength, but also their vulnerability. This new information gave Alan an idea. If they couldn't match the Vran in numbers, perhaps they could force a victory through this biological weakness. But would exploiting it make them no better than the conquerors they fought against? He called his officers together for a frank discussion. Our mission was revenge, he told them. But I'm beginning to question if that's enough. Should we become the monsters we've hated for 500,000 years? Or should we find another way? Maria frowned. They destroyed our world. They nearly wiped out our species. They deserve no mercy. But if we destroy them completely, Diane countered, how are we different from them? Sam offered a middle path. The nanite weapons can be reprogrammed. Instead of targeting all Vran biology, we could focus on their military capabilities while sparing civilians. As they debated, news arrived that the Vran Supreme Leader had ordered the complete sterilization of all human conservation zones on Earth. Zoe's resistance fighters were engaged in desperate battles to protect their people. The debate ended. Whatever moral questions remained, they couldn't allow the last humans on Earth to be exterminated. Prepare the fleet, Alan ordered. We make our final stand at Earth. Not just for revenge now, but for the survival of those who remained. As the human ships prepared for what might be their last battle, Alan stared at the distant image of Earth on his view screen. The planet that had been home, lost for 500,000 years, now holding the last free humans. 500,000 years ago we went to sleep to preserve hope, he said quietly. Today we wake to preserve what remains of humanity, whatever it costs us. The final battle for Earth began at dawn. The human fleet, outnumbered but determined, emerged from the Kuiper Belt and advanced toward their ancient home world. Commander Alan Weber had divided their forces into 3 groups. The main battle, group led by Earth's Memory, would engage the Vran defense fleet directly. A smaller force under Maria Reynolds would target the orbital platforms, and a special infiltration team would attempt to reach the surface. All ships, prepare for combat, Alan ordered from the bridge of Earth's Memory. Remember why we fight. Not just for revenge, but for the future of our species. The Vran were waiting. Their ships formed a defensive wall around Earth, weapons ready. The Supreme Leader had gathered their best forces to protect their prize colony. As human ships came within range, energy beams lanced between the opposing fleets. The Vran had numbers, but the humans had 500,000 years of technological development. Shields designed by Gaia during their long sleep deflected many Vran attacks, while advanced targeting systems allowed precise strikes against enemy vessels. Captain Lisa Morgan, Science Officer Diane Mitchell, and a small team had boarded a specialized stealth craft. Their mission was to infiltrate the main Vran citadel and access their collective consciousness network. They wore devices that masked their human biosignatures, making them appear as Vran to sensors. We'll have one chance at this, Diane told the team as their ship slipped past the space battle, heading for the surface. The program must be uploaded directly into their main system. The program was a modified version of Gaia, designed to disrupt the Vran command structure. If successful, it would temporarily paralyze their ability to coordinate forces. On Earth, Zoe Adams and her resistance fighters were already in motion. Using tunnels dug over generations, they emerged near key Vran infrastructure points. Their mission was to prevent the Vran from activating their final defense, a weapon that would render Earth uninhabitable rather than surrender it. Remember the plan, Zoe instructed her fighters. Disable, don't destroy. We want an Earth we can still live on when this is over. In orbit, the battle raged. Human ships darted between larger Vran vessels, using their superior speed and agility. But losses mounted on both sides. 3 more human ships were destroyed, their crews lost. Vran cruisers exploded in brilliant flashes as direct hits breached their reactors. Lisa's infiltration team landed near the outskirts of the main Vran city. Using their disguise technology, they moved through the streets, heading toward the central citadel, a massive structure that rose above all others. "Stay calm," Lisa advised as they passed Vran citizens. "Move with purpose, but don't draw attention." Inside the citadel, the Vran Supreme Leader received concerning reports. Despite their numerical advantage, their fleet was suffering heavy losses. The humans fought with unexpected skill and determination. "They cannot be allowed to reclaim this world," the Supreme Leader declared. "Prepare the sterilization protocol. If we cannot have Earth, neither will they." The military commander hesitated. "Supreme Leader, the sterilization will kill millions of our own people." "They are acceptable losses," came the cold reply. "This is about more than Earth now. If humans return, our entire empire could be threatened." As the military commander reluctantly left to carry out the orders, Lisa's team reached the central control room. They neutralized the guards with stun weapons and sealed the doors. "We have 10 minutes before they override the security," Greggy warned as Diane connected to the main system. Diane worked quickly, uploading the modified Gaia program into the Vran network. "Initiating now," she said. "If this works, their entire command structure should freeze temporarily." Throughout the solar system, Vran commanders suddenly found themselves unable to give orders. Their neural links to the central command system stuttered and failed. Ships drifted in confusion as their captains lost connection to the hierarchy that governed their every decision. Commander Weber saw the effect immediately. The coordinated Vran defense pattern dissolved into chaos. "Now," he ordered, "deploy the nanite weapons." From the human ships, clouds of microscopic machines spread toward the Vran fleet. These weren't designed for destruction, but for targeted disruption. They invaded Vran ships through ventilation systems and attached to specific biological components, the living tech that the Vran integrated into their vessels. Meanwhile, Zoe's team reached the sterilization control center. They engaged in fierce combat with Vran security forces. Many resistance fighters fell, but they pushed forward, determined to prevent the weapon's activation. "Cut the main power lines," Zoe commanded. "All of them." Her fighters planted explosives at key junction points. The blasts severed the connections to the orbital weapons platform that would deliver the sterilization agent. In the Citadel, the Supreme Leader realized what was happening. The humans had somehow disrupted their entire command network. In desperation, he attempted to reach the backup controls for the sterilization protocol, only to find Lisa and her team waiting. "This ends now," Lisa said, weapon raised. "Your empire stops here." The Supreme Leader's eyes widened. "Impossible. You're extinct." "Clearly not," Diane replied. "But you have a choice now. Continue this fight and face extinction yourselves, or negotiate." In orbit, the human fleet had gained the upper hand. The nanite swarms disabled Vran ships without destroying them. The specialized weapons targeting the Vran's biological vulnerability left their crews incapacitated but alive. Commander Weber opened a direct channel to the Vran leadership. With their network disrupted and their ships disabled, he offered terms. "Immediate evacuation of the solar system," he demanded. "Recognition of Earth and all planets here as sovereign human territory. In return, your people will be allowed to leave unharmed." The Supreme Leader, faced with defeat, had no choice but to accept. The alternative was the complete destruction of their forces. In the days that followed, Vran ships departed the solar system in long convoys. Many Vran civilians who had known no other home than Earth for generations were forced to leave. Weber ordered his forces to ensure the evacuation was orderly and without unnecessary suffering. "We won't become what we hated," he told his officers. "We reclaim our home with honor." 1 month later, Commander Weber stood on a cliff overlooking what had once been North America. The landscape was a strange mix of Earth elements and alien additions. Trees with purple leaves grew alongside recognizable pines. In the distance, the first new human city was under construction. Science Officer Diane joined him at the overlook. "It will take generations to fully restore Earth to what we would recognize as home," she said. "The Vran changes run deep." "But it's ours again," Alan replied, "after 500,000 years." They watched as Vran ships disappeared into the distance, the last of the evacuation fleet leaving the solar system. Earth-born humans and fleet crew worked together below, building the foundations of a new civilization. "They thought they had written the end of our story 500,000 years ago," Diane observed. "They never considered we might write the beginning of a new one." Alan nodded, looking toward the horizon where the first city of reclaimed Earth was taking shape. "Humanity endures," he said simply. "Now we build something worthy of those who waited 500,000 years for this day." In the new settlement, children from the conservation zones played alongside the children of fleet crew members. They would be the first generation of a new human civilization, one born not from conquest but from reclamation. The long wait was over. Earth belonged to humanity once more.